Meanwhile, hi, this is Seb.
And this is Marcus.
Welcome back to the show. You already know the gist. So today we're going to be talking about the most epic scenes in cinematic history. But what does that word mean? What makes a scene epic? Now, the official dictionary definition would say that it means heroic or grand in scale or character. And that will be the basic parameter of which we'll be picking our scenes. But that being said, the reasons don't necessarily have to be exclusive. There can indeed be overlap. We're looking at moments of badassery or heroism, where a character kicks some serious ass, a moment of gigantic scale, but above all else, it's a moment of emotion. A single scene that makes us fist bump, cheer, jump out of our seats, or even cry. On top of this, we'll also be looking into scenes in relation to plot, character development, and purpose. Now, before we go in, it's crucial to remember that these are in no particular order, and of course, are just our opinion. Furthermore, we know we'll also be missing some of them, so we might do a part 2. If you don't want to miss that, be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell notification button to never miss an upload. But without further ado, let Marcus and I take you through our most epic scenes in cinematic history. Part 1.
Alright, starting off with our list. So nowadays you'd associate Zack Snyder with the DC Universe. No shit. But in my mind, there's only one film that I can pick, and that is 2006's 300. Now, yes, I know you'll be shouting at your screens, "This is Sparta!" But I argued that the Spartans' first battle with Xerxes' Persian horde at the Hawk Gates steals the show. Utilizing the amazing slow motion and special effects, Zack masterfully shows the brutality of Jared Butler's King Leonidas and his Spartans dispatching the Persian attackers in a perfectly choreographed fight that only lasts for just under a minute and a half, with the screams of no mercy echoing in the background. And to top it all off, it's one long take of blood, guts, and limbs, accompanied by the one and only Tyler Bates' minimalistic music in the scene to have you completely focusing in on the eye candy that is happening before you. Now, the majority of this film was shot to a green screen and everything rendered and processed through special effects and digital rendering to give it the look and feel of Frank Miller's comic. This scene really does steal the show, showing us what the Spartans are truly capable of and depicting their legendary fighter status. This scene takes the cake and is my first pick for the most epic battle scenes in cinema.
No prisoners! No mercy!
So my first scene is a scene that needs no introduction.
On your left.
The portal scene in Endgame is in many ways the definition of epic. It's a pivotal moment in the rising action of the film, but above all else, it's the climax of story that's been 10 years in the making. The heroes are at their lowest, the odds are stacked against them, hope is all but lost. And then one line, one callback from the Falcon is all that we needed to know that the tides are about to turn. The amazing score kicks in, and every person watching begins to feel a swell of emotions. It has scale, it has purpose where it drives the themes of the film, it has emotion, but above all else, it is a moment of heroism. I chose to start the scene with the lone Cap standing up against Thanos and his army, because firstly, it's badass, but it's a character-driven moment. We already knew that Cap wouldn't give up, despite him and us knowing that he doesn't stand a chance. It's a character trait that's been developed in Cap for years, so it felt earned and fits with his arc. And then we finally get
Avengers! Assemble.
People love to see their heroes be heroes, and there's nothing more epic than that.
My next pick is the one and only Gladiator, Ridley Scott's Oscar-winning 2000 film. Now, of course, this whole film, I could argue, is just epic. The whole film. So, from when Maximus Decimus Meridius reveals who he is to the Emperor, to when he challenges the crowd and shouts the iconic, "Are you not entertained?" But I gotta say, it is the opening of this film that steals the show for me, because it is our introduction to the scale that we are about to be introduced to. So, this is the Romans fighting the last of the barbarians in Germania. The barbarian horde screams to intimidate the Romans, juxtaposed by how cool the Romans are, how relaxed they seem to be, the professionalism and order within their ranks, followed by the sheer savagery of the fighting depicted on screen when it commences, the shattering shields and swords, seeing one of the greatest armies the planet has ever seen, the professional soldier, in the action that is of their catapults, their tortoise formations, the cavalry charges against the barbarian hordes. The scale of this battle feels immense, with Ridley going the extra mile to have hundreds of extras in wardrobe just to add to the realism of the battle and the chaos that is depicted. It isn't a pretty picture of war, but why should it be? There are a few key moments that add to the feeling of the fight, led by Maximus when he shouts to his men, "Stay with me!" as they charge into the hustle and the bustle of the battle, all enhanced by the brilliant Hans Zimmer, with his aptly titled The Battle, full of rising crescendos and diminuendos to complement what we see on screen. What we do in life echoes in eternity, and this scene, this film, will as well.
Now, my first pick was a scene that was in the final act of a story, so for my next, I thought it'd be interesting to do the exact opposite. This is the opening scene of Once Upon a Time in the West by Sergio Leone. The film opens with a long and slow scene that many audiences may complain about nowadays, but its genius cannot be understated. Three men of less than a savory nature, seen from them threatening an innocent, are waiting at a train station. We don't know what for, we don't know who for. We're kept in the dark, in suspense. They're killing time in their own ways, and it's dragged out on purpose to really build that tension and give us an idea that these three men are there for a reason. They're not just there to chill about. After almost 5 long minutes, we finally see the train on the horizon. The three men sluggishly begin to stand. They look at one another, giving each other knowing nods, and take their positions. Mind you, this scene has no dialogue between the men, it's all just diegetic sound. The train leaves and the audience and the men are misdirected into thinking that the person that they're waiting for isn't there. Then we get one single sound. All of a sudden, we're in the middle of a Mexican standoff, and we're given one of the sickest lines of all time.
You'll bring a horse for me? Well, looks like we're shy of one horse. You brought too many.
The tension continues to build, the score kicks in, and boom. all three men are down, one of the bad guys gets a shot in, but Harmonica just stands up and walks on. This scene sets up the tone of the film that follows. It introduces us to the protagonist in the most badass of ways. It's a masterclass in tension building and in use of sound and editing, and is without a doubt one of the most epic moments in cinematic history.
So for my next pick, Park Chan-Wook's Oldboy. Now this film hit theaters in 2003 as a second part of his Vengeance trilogy, and to me has become a standout film with one of the most shocking twist endings put to film. Centered around Dae-Soo-oh's journey to find who imprisoned him for 15 years, the famous hallway fight occurs after he has found his handlers, the people who imprisoned him for 15 years. Now, it's him versus a crowd of thugs. And by a crowd of thugs, I mean one man versus 20 armed thugs. The sheer anger of Dae-Soo-oh in this scene, one man's vengeance and anger shown through his willingness to fight to what seems an impossible number of armed men. The rage is felt through every punch he throws. Even after being stabbed in the back, he continues his barrage of rage and successfully fights off the thugs to continue his vendetta to find out who stole 15 years of his life from him. Shot in 3 days, no editing was used to glue multiple sequences together like you would get in the Bourne trilogy. This is one long take. One long perfect take, perfectly choreographed, and the only editing and CG used was the knife that Dae-Soo-oh was stabbed with. I mean, fair play. This scene is epic, not because of its scale. It's epic because of the emotion. It's epic because we see our character finally let loose some of his pent-up anger that he's had for 15 years, not knowing who did this to him. The sheer emotion from Choi Min-sik's Dae-Soo-oh, the sheer retribution of one man on a quest for vengeance.
Now, we've covered some epic hero moments, but like we said, epic isn't just reserved for heroes. A villain can be equally capable of a moment of epicness. Look at Thanos, look at Verbal in Usual Suspects. But when it comes to an epic villain moment, there is only one that matters. Has there been a more oh shit moment in film history? Maybe, but one must admit that this scene is arguably one of the best scenes in Star Wars history. A moment where we see why Vader is feared across the galaxy. It's a moment that raises the stakes, builds tension, character, and just downright slaps. Prior to this point, we've never seen Vader really kick as much ass. We've seen glimpses, and of course we've seen Anakin do some cool stuff. But it was due time to give one of the most iconic villains in cinematic history a moment to show why he is heralded as such. Is it fan service? Yes, but it isn't without purpose. It certainly isn't without badassery and emotion, and so I had to include this scene.
For my next pick, I'll be revisiting another Sergio Leone film, because he is undoubtedly the king of Western, creating the spaghetti Western with his Dollars trilogy, and is well known for his juxtaposing extreme close-up shots and scenic long shots. Arguably, he's most well known for the good, the bad, and the ugly. The third and final in the Dollars trilogy, again, starring the one and only Clint Eastwood as the man with no name. And this is my next pick for the most epic scene in cinematic history. And it is the final duel between the trio of the man with no name, Angel Eyes, and the Rat. This scene oozes Leone, from the quick cuts between the characters' faces to their itchy trigger fingers, to the long shots of the graveyard they duel in. This scene was the final showdown between three of the greatest characters put to film, and the climax of the Dollars trilogy. So much is at stake. We can't ignore Morricone's harrowing score either. because the beauty of the vocals, the rising trumpets, enhance this scene, further adding to the emotion each of the trio must be feeling as they know at any moment one of them could die, until they all draw and you hear 3 men shoot in unison and a moment of silence until Angel Eyes falls and 2 men are left standing. This is a truly epic moment in cinema history and the conclusion to one of the most iconic trilogies of all time.
Now, all my scenes have been battle scenes so far, but epic doesn't necessarily have to be a battle either. The first time we see color in The Wizard of Oz, Taylor seeing the Statue of Liberty, the Chariots of Fire, but my penultimate pick belongs to a literal ceasefire in Alfonso Cuarón's The Children of Men. In a world where mankind has become infertile, war and chaos has broken out. The future of man hangs in the balance and in the hands of Key, the first pregnant woman in 18 years, a miracle. It's up to Theo to make sure she is led to safety and can raise the child away from violence. And it crescendos to this amazing scene at the climax of the 3rd act, wherein the shooting stops for a brief moment when everyone fighting sees Key and her child.
Move back! Fucking move back! Stop! Cease fire! Cease firing!
The soldiers, whom at first are pointing their guns at them, go from pure aggression to stunned amazement, and then desperately call for a ceasefire, all in literally a second or two. It's a moment in the film where everyone pauses and takes it in, which is crazy to do in a pinnacle of the film's rising action. It's epic in a very different way, as it was the only scene in the movie that, albeit temporarily, broke down the barrier between oppressor and the oppressed, and highlighted that everyone was in it together. For a short time, the relentless tension, anxiety, and paranoia that had characterized the movie so far eased off a little bit, and let shared humanity take center stage. It almost literally felt like a breath of fresh air.
There are many examples of when a piece of music is so tied to the imagery of a film, but when you hear Ragnar's Ride of the Valkyries in Francis Ford Coppola's iconic Vietnam War flick, Apocalypse Now, you can't help but think of helicopters forming rank and descending on Vietnam. As the orchestra begins to build into crescendo, we follow the Air Cavalry, led by Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore, played by the one and only Robert Duvall, as they mount their aerial assault on a VC-occupied village. This 5-minute scene oozes epicness. We see the full power of the American Air Force and the helplessness of the people below. First, the silence in the village, and the church bells signaling the alarm of the oncoming attack. People fleeing for their lives. The panning wide shots of the helicopters in formation. The snappy close-ups of the soldiers who occupy them. Waiting in anticipation to attack their objective. The sheer volume of absolute power in the sky that we know are going to dominate in moments. This scene is a true masterclass in how to build tension with the use of music. Nowadays, with films being littered with CGI, back then, Apocalypse Now used real helicopters, and that adds to the weight, that adds to the volume of what you're seeing on the screen, the realness. And that is why Apocalypse Now is my final pick for most epic film moments.
So my final scene is akin to my first pick. It's a moment where all hope is lost. The heroes are at a low point and it's looking bleak. And again, similar to Portals, it's kicked off by a single sound. It is a sound that sends chills down my spine to this day. You knew that the riders of Rohan were coming, but it doesn't make the scene less epic at all. Seeing them come into sight upon the hill with the sun behind them, the rousing speech by Theoden.
Spears shall be shaken, shields shall be splintered. A sword day, a red day,
And that sweeping shot of the army can make any man cry. It's a moment where you feel hope has returned, you feel empowered. You feel that even when all is against you, despite all the darkness and cruelty, hope and heroism can still be found. The writers of Endgame have gone ahead and said that Portals was heavily inspired by this scene, and it shows. We've seen many similar scenes come after, but in many ways this was the one that redefined the word epic. And that is all that needs to be said.
And that is our list. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, hit us up in the comments below and let us know if you agreed with our picks. What would you pick as your most epic film moments of all time? Now, as Seb and I said at the beginning of this video, we might do a part 2, and if you'd like that, please do let us know. We might even take some of your picks into consideration. I've been Marcus.
And I've been Seb. Bye.